Hi there, Catherine Mattice. I am the founder and CEO of Stability Partners. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We would love for you to tell us where you are in the world, where you're watching from. Today, I have a really awesome guest, someone I've known for quite a while, and I'm a fan. My parents are actually a fan. My dad's going to be so excited to know that I did this with you, Bill. Bill is one of the founders of I want to make sure I get this right, the High Conflict Institute. He's the Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder. And we started about the same time. He started in 2008 and was also a lawyer and a mediator for quite a while there, and also a therapist. So you've got a lot of different backgrounds that you bring into your work. So thanks so much for being with me, Bill, today.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
So tell me about the High Conflict Institute. You started around the same time I did. Tell me about what you do there.
Yeah, so we're really an education and training institute. We got started, Megan Hunter, the co-founder, and I both had worked with high conflict divorce cases. I was a family lawyer practicing in court for 15 years, doing mediation for over 30 years, because I also did it as a therapist, which I was for 12 years. So 3 careers kind of overlapping.
Yeah.
And we realized that we really wanted to help calm down these high conflict disputes. And so the first year or so, we really focused on family law professionals, lawyers, therapists, judges, mediators. But then we started hearing from all lawyers, and they said, well, I've got this dispute with neighbors. And then we started hearing from human resources, and they said, well, hey, we need your stuff for the workplace. And so within a couple of years, we were starting to do trainings all over for human resources, EAPs, employment assistance professionals, and also managers, administrators, hospital administrators, college administrators.
Yeah.
So we really looked at conflict everywhere, and we've been training. We're now in our 15th year, which means you are too.
I'm close. I'm a couple years behind you, but yeah, getting there. I always joke that people make this comment, why can't we just act like adults? And I always think adults aren't really great at conflict. We're not all that mature in dealing with our conflict. There would not be war or politicians or therapists or lawyers if we were really great at acting like adults. So I always find that funny. Where there's people, there's drama, right?
Oh, yeah. But I want to emphasize that about 10% of people may be high conflict people who are really responsible for probably 90% of the conflict that really gets people's attention. So it's not everybody, but we all need to pay attention and manage ourselves well.
Yeah. So how do you define a high conflict person? How would we know that we're in an argument with a high conflict person?
Well, there's 4 characteristics, kind of behaviors. So one is they're preoccupied with blaming others, tend to take zero responsibility. It's all your fault, not just partly, it's all your fault. Then they have a lot of all or nothing thinking and solutions. You know, it's my way or the highway, so get with it. Then they often have unmanaged emotions. So they may start yelling where it's really inappropriate. They may throw papers at people. They may throw other things at people. And extreme behaviors. We see that many of them do things that 90% of people would never do, like spreading knowingly false rumors on the internet, pilfering company property, punching holes in walls, doing these threatening things, and maybe even assaulting people.
Yeah.
So these 4 characteristics, blame, all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, and extreme behaviors.
And how do you know that it's 10% of the population? How did you come to that number?
Well, that's a wild estimate on my
Okay.
part. But let me say that we do connect this to personality disorders who have been studied, and there are some statistics about. And personality disorders, the current manual for mental health professionals, the DSM-5-TR text revision, says that about 10.5% of adults have a personality disorder. Now, not all of them are high conflict because they don't all have this preoccupation with blaming others. So I think there's two things that overlap. Maybe 5% have personality disorder, what we call a cluster B personality disorder,
Okay.
narcissistic, borderline, antisocial, and histrionic. And they are often present in our high conflict disputes, high conflict behavior. So there's some overlap. The key thing about personality disorders is whatever pattern of behavior they have, they're stuck in. And it's a narrow pattern. They keep repeating it. So you're going to see it now. You're going to see it 5 years, 10 years from now.
And I mean, I'm going way off topic and diving down this path. I'm so fascinated. By the way, we have people calling in or watching from Albania, Pakistan, India, Saudi Arabia. By all means, post your questions and we'll make sure that Bill can answer them. So if you have questions about high conflict people, type them in there and let's get them answered.
That's great.
Now I forgot what my question was.
So you're going to go
We'll
off.
come
I was
back to
talking
it.
about personality disorders overlapping with high conflict personalities, and
Yeah.
that they're stuck. And that's the problem. People think they'll change. Oh, he gets it now. He'll do it better, and they don't change. That's what we're seeing.
That was my question. How is it possible at all for them to change or just no way?
Well, there's a continuum. So some people are more extreme. Some people may have traits like people talk about narcissists. Everybody's a narcissist today, but they don't all have narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe 6% of the population does, according to the DSM statistics. So if they're less severe, then they're more possible to change. And I think you've probably seen this in your work with managers and executives, coaching them. And we also have a coaching method, the New Ways for Work coaching method. And we see maybe half the people make some change and half the people don't. And they end up moving out of the organization or out of the position they're in often.
Yeah. They become someone else's problem.
So let's be optimistic and say maybe half can and half can't.
Okay. And we've talked about this before, whether or not bullying and high conflict individuals are one and the same. I don't know. I don't know the answer because the my way or the highway is certainly something I see a lot in my work, but they're lacking that kind of extreme behavior. Most of the time, the people I'm coaching are lacking that. So maybe they're missing that fourth thing you talked about. But I do come across sometimes those extreme people where it's like, I can't help you. I can't coach you for change versus others who are mortified that people view them so high conflict and as so abrasive, which is the word I use. And they want to change.
Yeah. And that's a good point you're making. And part of the reason they don't change is because they don't see what other people see. They lack this self-awareness of how they affect other people. And so when other people are upset with them, they go, "What's wrong with you?"
Right.
Instead of going, "Oh, I'll have to think about that." And this is a key thing for healthy people, people without a personality disorder or high conflict personality, is to ask two questions. One is, what's my part in this problem? And if you can think of something, even maybe that you got into a situation. And the other is, what can I do differently? Because high conflict people don't ask themselves those two questions. And bullies don't ask themselves. Bullies, I think in many ways that there's a lot of overlap with bullies, that they do have some extreme behavior and they're blamers. And that doesn't work.
I agree with that. Okay, we have a question. How do you address a communication issue with someone who's not self-aware? That's actually a great question. That leads into why we're here today. Let's talk about Biff.
Biff. So what we say is respond, especially in writing, you have time to think this through. Respond in a way that's brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And so brief, usually no more than a paragraph, even if they've written 2 or 3 letters telling you how horrible you are as a person. That's what we call blame speak. And that's about them, not about you. It's their lack of restraint. So be brief, be informative, just focus on straight information, not defenses, arguments, emotions, opinions, just straight information.
Mhm.
So you might say, they say, you made all this noise yesterday. And so rather than saying, you're so stupid, you don't even know where I was yesterday, don't say that. Instead, say, you may not be aware that I was out of the office all day yesterday on an assignment. And then you want it to be friendly. So you might say, thank you for letting me know your concerns. And you want it to be firm. You want it to end the hostile conversation. So you don't put any hooks out there like, what do you think of that, buddy? You don't want to hook them
Right.
back in. So you might say, thanks for letting me know your concern. You may not be aware I was out of the office all day yesterday on an assignment. And if it's Friday afternoon, say, I hope you have a good weekend, or uh, take care.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to say. Rather than criticizing what they've done, is give them the accurate information. And that would be a Biff response. Or if you need a question answered, is try to turn it into a yes or no question and say, please let me know yes or no by Thursday at 5. And
Mhm.
then that's the end of your Biff response. So brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It's so simple. We've been teaching it for 15 years. And we think we've reached maybe 500,000 people from our books and trainings. And everybody that learns this method tends to teach somebody else. So maybe we've reached 1 million people with this method. It's so simple.
Yeah, well, you know what, Bill? I wrote a blog post about it probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'm going to revamp that blog post, bring it back around, and I'll put it back out in my e-newsletter because it is beautiful. And I'll just say I've certainly used it, and it does take a little restraint to, maybe you type out your horrible, I'm so frustrated response, and then you just get rid of it. That you got your emotions out, and then you do the Biff. But there is honestly some satisfaction in being that way and just being kind of the rock of here you've gone crazy and I'm just gonna be normal. And
Yes,
there's that. So
you're pouring cold water on the flames, and you
yeah,
get to feel good
yeah,
because you
exactly.
didn't get down in the mud.
Exactly. Now you've got a couple different books about this, right? One for family law situations or divorce, one for workplace. What are all the
Yeah.
books you have?
So the first one's the generic one, and this came out in 2011, so it's 11 years old. Then during COVID, we put out Biff for co-parent communication,
Mhm.
and this has been #1 much of the last year and a half on the separation and divorce family law category on Amazon. And then last year we got out Biff at Work, your guide to difficult workplace communication. And so your listeners in particular may really want to see that because we've got
Yeah.
over 30. We list them in the back. If you get the book, get the list in the back for your situation. We've got customer service, we've got financial managers, we've got coworkers with a deadline,
Yeah.
coworkers about friendship, um, ethical implications with the boss that wants to have you do something unethical. We've got the arrogant boss, we have the new difficult manager. Anyway, we
We
go
got all
on and
kinds of
on.
things. Yeah. And I'm honored that you sent me some free copies. So
Yep.
yeah, I can attest to how great they are. And like I said, I've used Biff personally many times over the years. So one other thing I wanted to ask you is I know you have 10 questions to think about or respond or answer in your head before you send out communication. Can you give us some insight on what some of those questions are?
Yes. So first of all, if you can, show it to somebody else and have them help you think about it. And if you're coaching somebody, ask them these questions. But if you don't have anybody else around, just ask yourself. So the first four is a brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Then we have what we call the 3 A's. Does it have any advice? Because sometimes people are tempted to give advice when that's not what the other person's looking for at all, especially if they're upset or misinformed. So you
Yeah.
don't want to give them advice, just straight information. Admonishments, look, buddy, you should be more careful about XYZ. That's an admonishment. That's not going to be a Biff response. That's going to escalate.
Hmm.
Also, apologies, and this is counterintuitive. So most people, apologies are really great. But for high conflict people, because of their all or nothing thinking, if you say, I'm sorry for this little tiny thing, what they hear is you agree it's all your fault. And
Right.
so they'll carry that around. They'll pull that out at a meeting and say, see, she admitted it's her fault.
Mm.
And so maybe there's a place or time for that, but not in a written Biff response,
Yeah.
because usually you're just going to be feeding ammunition.
Yeah. Can
So
I interrupt you for a second and add
yeah,
the female perspective there too? Females, we tend to apologize quite a bit, given the way our the social constructs that we're raised in, and so that one really resonates with me because I am always very careful with my apologies. I only apologize if I really, really need to in the workplace. I'm not. So be careful with that. Is all I'm saying to the
yes.
women.
And I think you're quite right. And women really like this because it gives them an excuse to
Yeah.
not feel like you have to always do that. And we teach this a lot in Canada and also Australia. And those countries are very used to saying sorry. And
Mhm.
so, oh, sorry that,
Yeah, no
and
worries, sorry, yeah.
yeah. And I told them, I don't know how you'll feel about this. And they said, we agree. And so it's been very easy to teach this in your Biff response, leave out the sorry. Now, if you feel bad someone's in a situation, you can say, I'm saddened to see you in this situation.
Mhm,
But
yeah,
don't say, I'm sorry to see you. They goes, oh, you're sorry. See, it's your fault, Bill, that I'm in this situation.
yeah, and also don't say, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I'm sorry
Right.
that's not actually an apology, so
Right, right. So that's 7 questions. The
Mhm,
8th question is, how do you think the other person will respond to this, if at all? And often a good Biff response doesn't get another response. And I've really helped people carefully craft their Biff responses in some very high conflict situations. And they tell me a week later, I never heard back. And that's usually a good thing.
right.
So how's the other person going to respond? Number 9 is, now looking at all of those questions, is there anything that you would take out, add, or change? And like I said, you can ask this if you're coaching somebody or ask yourself. And question 10 is, do you want to get someone else's thoughts about it? So if you're coaching somebody, the first 9 questions you direct to the writer of the Biff, and don't give your opinion until question 10. And I teach this to lawyers a lot, and that's so hard for them to do. Oh, but I
Yeah,
want to show them how to do it right away. They said, yeah, but then you'll be writing all their emails for the next few years.
yeah,
So they like it. They get used to it. Uh,
yeah, yeah. And this is why my dad is a fan. He is a judge and goes to bar association events and things, and he, because of what I do, he's always taking a picture. Oh, look here, Bill's got a new book out. I'm like, I know, Bill. Stop sending me these pictures. But he's always so excited. We have another question. How do you handle workplace conflict smartly if someone is short-tempered? So what, maybe give us something beyond the Biff. What's another tip for us?
Well, if it's in a conversation, we also have a method we call ear statements. And ear statements show empathy, attention, or respect. And any of these 3 tend to calm down an angry, hostile person in a conversation. So think of Biff in writing, think of ear statements if you're in a conversation, like you and I are in a conversation. We can do this virtually or in person or over the phone. And what you do is think of a sentence that shows, for example, empathy. Sentences that begin with, I can understand, like I can understand your frustration, or I can see how upsetting this is to you. or I can hear that you're so disappointed in how this went. That shows that you're treating them as an equal. I can understand, I can see, I can hear, and
Yeah.
you're connecting with what they're experiencing. But you're not opening it up. When you've got hostile people, you don't want to say, tell me everything I did that made you angry, because they'll have to think of stuff and they're going to keep in the negative. You don't want to reinforce that. Now, attention, you might say, tell me more. I want to understand your point of view or your concern. And
Mhm.
respect. I respect the work, that project you did last week. I really respect how well you did that. Or that meeting you led. I respect that. Or I respect your commitment to solving this problem.
Mhm.
Um, or I respect your years of service to this company. You've really contributed a lot. So it has to be honest, has to be true, and you're trying to focus on the positive, not, digging in for negative, just
Yeah.
acknowledging them with empathy, attention, or respect. Then look at your choices. What can we do now? And
Mhm.
usually, if someone's angry, like let's say an employee comes to a manager and says, Joe's making too much noise in the next cubicle. So you can say, oh, that sounds frustrating. Let's talk about it a little bit. And then say, and what do you suggest? Because
Mhm.
when someone brings a complaint, you want them to bring a solution.
Yeah.
So give them an ear statement and then look at what are some solutions here. So it keeps it moving and don't focus on how they feel. Just acknowledge they're frustrated, upset, and then look at what do we do now.
Yeah. Now, one thing we talk about in our bystander training, bystander intervention training,
Mm,
which is for, this kind of situation where you maybe overhear something that's aggressive or abrasive, a high conflict scenario, and you want to step in. And even if you're wanting to kind of protect yourself in this situation, we talk about validation, which is your ear statement, validate how they feel in some way, shape, or form
mhm.
by saying, I understand that this is really stressful, or I understand we have a deadline, or I understand why you feel that way. And then describe the impact of it to say something like, but when you're yelling at me in a staff meeting, it just really makes it hard for me to take in the information because I'm caught off guard. In the future, could you please, try to keep your voice down so that we can have a more successful meeting or whatever. So kind of we add a couple steps to your statement and then seeking
Yeah,
solutions. I think sometimes it's good to say, here's my solution.
yeah, yeah.
Here's what I
I
need you to do.
Yeah, I think very similar, and that's such a common issue. I think since about 2008, when we all started, that the surveys of the workplace, that the number one problem was other people.
Mhm.
Before that, it was schedules, workload, things like that, and I think it's been other people ever since. So the work you're doing, the work we're doing, I think is very complementary and
100%.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with the great resignation or great reshuffle or whatever you want to call it, I'm seeing research out of Boston Consulting Group and Pew that it really is about toxic environments, people feeling disrespected, or they've just decided, we've always heard people don't leave jobs, they leave their managers, that old cliche, that people are finally taking action. So just the focus on being more empathetic is just continuing. It's weird. It's like, how did we get out of whack not being empathetic? And the paradigm is shifting, and HR is caring more about making sure there's empathy floating around the workplace. And unfortunately, things like Me Too and Black Lives Matter had to happen to highlight that, hey, we need to be more empathetic and understanding and
Yeah, I think
respectful.
it's a much bigger world now. We're very interconnected with close to 9 billion people.
Yeah.
And so, but also a lot of the communication, the most aggressive people dominate on social media, on cable news, all of this. That we're
Mhm.
seeing the bullies, the high conflict people kind of rising in a culture that's new like this, that lets anybody say anything. And
Hmm.
we're going, wait, we can't have everybody saying anything. There really does need to be some standards, some empathy, some respect for each other. And
Yeah.
so I think we're almost having to rebuild that from the ground up because of these other influences that are coming at us so fast, and we haven't adapted just the last 10, 15 years. I mean, I remember days before cell phones, you
Yeah.
know. You didn't have all this flooding you with negativity. So it really, so I think what you're doing, what we're doing is trying to handle the negativity by turning it into positive, like people used to be. And a
Yeah.
standard I like to use is my mother, because I remember when I was a kid, my mother would say, I got to wash out your mouth with soap, Bill, for saying.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so if I'm thinking of something nasty to say, I say, what would my mother say? If my mother would say, I'm going to wash out your mouth with soap for saying that, that's a no-no. And I still use that as a standard.
Yeah, same here. We pose that question in our trainings. If you would not say that in front of grandma or mom or your sister, don't say it.
Yep.
Let's see. Someone says, can you share some tips to handle repetitive defaulters at the workplace? Maybe elaborate for us on what you mean by repetitive defaulters. I'm maybe assuming you mean people who continue to get back into a pattern of high conflict, but
It,
maybe elaborate for us
yeah,
if they do so.
I don't usually use that term. So I'm guessing I do get asked, what about people that just say yes to everything and they don't do it?
Hmm.
Or the more passive people that just won't really participate that much. And I think, your statements to engage people, looking at their choices, and I think letting people know consequences. That if someone doesn't participate, is there a consequence for that? Maybe
Yeah,
we're doing an activity that everyone on the team needs to learn and practice, and someone doesn't learn that. You can tell them the positive and negative consequences. If you learn this, it's going to make it easier to work with you. You'll be happier, etc. And if you don't learn this, it may be harder for you to function on this team.
yeah,
So I think today there's a hesitance to set limits and have consequences, and especially with high conflict people,
yep,
they don't stop themselves. So other people do need to have clearer limits, clearer consequences. And we really teach that policies are a really good thing to have. And you can always say, our policy says you can't do that. So
yep.
here's the consequence.
Yes, and also core values. So, a lot of organizations have the anti-harassment policy. Smart organizations have an anti-bullying policy also.
Mhm.
You may have a code of conduct, but core values, if you're building a strong company culture, I think that one benefit of many of really leaning
Yeah,
into core values and when organizations really use them is that gives managers and supervisors a way to talk about behavior, to say, well, look, our core value is respect or inclusivity or whatever it is. And that the gossiping or the getting after people or sending the nasty emails where you see people, that goes against that. So it doesn't have to be so, because I feel like as a society, it's so, is that illegal or not? Oh, it's not. Well, then I don't know what to do about it. And we go into
right.
organizations so often where managers have never been told to manage that kind of, I say, lower level stuff like microaggressions or gossip or incivility or the sarcasm or the interrupter, and yeah, we've got to, as organizations, make sure we're giving tools to leaders, managers, supervisors to have
Yeah,
these conversations. So that's the answer to the question about the repetitive defaulters. Lean on your policies, have your regular conversations with them about what's going on with their behavior and what you need from them to be different, and hold them accountable. And that's the thing that,
yeah.
workplaces, for whatever reason, we're afraid of high conflict people, I think. And so it can be difficult to hold them accountable, but you gotta.
Yeah, and the tools are simple. That's what everything we teach, we try to make it really simple.
You do,
And
yeah.
so we can calm down other people. And I want to say emotions are contagious. So if you can stay calm, if you can stay positive, it's hard for the people around you to stay negative. They get kind of swept up with the positivity. So it's
Yeah.
everyone can do this. One person can turn things around into the positive.
100%. Well, thank you, Bill, so much. It was so great to chat with you today. I really appreciate our friendship, and I know you cannot make it to the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment conference this year, but your Biff method and all of that, I know the attendees would love to hear what you're working on. So maybe next time.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And good
Thank,
luck with all your work. You're doing great.
thank you. You too.